Aloha and welcome to Truth in Movies. In this segment, we break down the movies and I comment throughout the movie as we check it out so we can find the esoteric breadcrumbs that are hidden in these movies. I feel like I learn a lot when I watch the movies about life, about hidden history, about prophecy, about the future and the modern world. So we've already broken down Riddick's part 1 and 2. Respectively. And today we're doing part 3, Riddick 2013. Let's jump right into it. Good to see everybody in the chat today during the live stream. If you're watching in the future, good to see you. Now, the movie starts off very much like the other movies have, where it shows you the little intro of the world. This is the people who brought you the movie. Now, check this out. I want to compare this movie production intro to the other Riddick movie production intros. Now, we talked about how the other movies were about the blue beam going up and the time of the red sky that we enter into, and how Riddick represents the red sky, or the world of magic that has left us, that will one day return to us. So that's what these movies are all following. Now, it shows you the world, but there's a huge difference between this one and the other movie introductions where it shows those beams of light. In this one, those beams of light are clearly retracted. So you're looking at the water world, right? So in this one, they're showing you those beams of light. Here's the other Riddick movie where it shows you those same beams of light shooting up out of the earth, right? Which is what ancient Native American prophecies talked about, how there was a time when the sky was so low that the people of the world had to hold poles or beams up to the sky to sort of push the sky back up. Here's another example of the water world as it's showing you no beams though. And it says, brought to you by Universal. Universal, a universal story. This happens, I believe, on every world. And as you can see on these first two movies, right? The Universal logo is sort of what looks like an eclipse, right? It looks like a black hole, as it should have been for Pitch Black, especially because they have eclipses. But in this one, they don't have an eclipse. In this one, you actually see a faint ring of blue, a blue light that goes around there, which I believe is symbolic of the time when our sun turns blue and it starts to scorch the earth and burn the earth, as we talked about in the last Riddick movie. The Chronicles of Riddick. Now, you think this is the movie starting off, but it's actually another production company that is showing you their logo. So you see the sun and the earth, and then the sun is eclipsed. So we have another eclipse symbolism. The sun is eclipsed by the earth, and you just see this black hole up in the sky, which is what it is. It's a hole in the sky. That's why they're called black holes. They're holes. You can't have a hole in a hole, like a hole in space or whatever. You can have a hole in a physical object. And they're showing you that black hole that opens up in the sky with the light emanating from behind it. And it's called One Race. This production company is called One Race. And it shows you the world on the top there. Very interesting. All in red. So we start things off. We kick things off on the last Riddick movie. Last time on Riddick, right? He had just defeated the necromonger race. He killed the king of the necromongers, basically. Or the head marshal, the lead marshal or whatever his name was, and they keep what they kill. So because he killed the leader of the necromongers, Riddick actually became the leader. But when we kick things off on this movie, we pick up years later, and you'll find out what happened to him with the necromongers, but now he's on an entirely different world. Look at the color spectrum of this world. The world represents the red sky, the golden age, the age of magic and monsters and animals and mystery. And it's represented by this sort of dragon type of a bird that's flying around or whatnot, and then it lands. This is dinosaurs, basically. This is a type of dinosaurs. I call these Fantazoids. They're otherworldly animals or creatures that leave their they leave their macrocosms, or their they leave their world and they come into ours, basically, from below the earth or from outside of the sky. Now, Riddick starts off by saying, I don't know how many times I've been crossed off the list and left for dead. So this monster lands down on the ground and you can see Riddick's hand, symbolically like the hand of God. And this monster is one of the bad guys of our world. That's why we fear the monsters. I don't know how many times I've been left for dead and crossed off the list. You're going to lose count. So, symbolically speaking, he represents the red sky, which means that we have forgotten. We've crossed the red sky, the world of magic, the world of mystery, wonderland, how our world was completely different than the modern age that we have today. We've crossed it off the list. We've forgotten all about it entirely. And because of the apocalyptic events that happen every other cycle, or every cycle, I should say, they're responsible for the introduction of these monstrous forms that come into our world every cycle. That's whenever the doors to our world are symbolically and physically opened, and there's a window of opportunity, an actual physical window of opportunity that opens, where the barriers that keep those species above our world out and inside of our world in, those barriers come down, and the monsters flood into our world. He says this ain't nothing new. So this whole story is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. So we're going to follow the story of Vin Diesel as Riddick. What does Vin Diesel mean? This is pretty interesting. Vin comes from Vincent. And Vincent, if we take a look at the etymology of Vincent, comes from Vik or Vek, which means to fight or to conquer. So Vin Diesel, which is a stage name, by the way, Vincent means to fight or to conquer, a conqueror, right? Now, what does diesel mean? Diesel originates in the Germanic languages. Usually people just say it's a name, and they leave it at that. The inventor of diesel fluid, right? It's hard to find the actual word diesel and what it means, but I found it, and it means a people or a race. Therefore, Vin Diesel altogether implies a conquering race of people. Super interesting, right? And that brings us to our title screen, Riddick, with all of the red as it should be, because Riddick is the word rodok, which means, it's from rudu, which means red color, right? It means red. Something that is red or ruddy, which is the color of the sky whenever we get into the golden age. Now, we start things off. We see Riddick. He was buried under the ground for some strange reason. I don't know why he was under the ground. It doesn't really say that, but he grabs this Fantazoid, kills it. He escapes from being buried under the ground. Now, that's also the light. The light of the world is under the ground for a time, and then it comes up out of the world, and it reemerges, and then it goes back in, and it goes back and forth every cycle. So Riddick is... he's injured, he's hurt, and he's crawling through what looks like some sort of a dusty red desert world or something. This is his spectral vision. This is Riddick's, how he sees things. This is the vision that I believe what it looks like for plasma and other entities that are highly charged electromagnetically or have a strong spirit. They see things in another form, another way. So Riddick comes up, he's thirsty, he sees a pool of water, he starts to go to drink it, but then he smells it and he realizes it's not good to drink. Right? Remember, Riddick has that sort of animal side where most humans would just be thirsty and drink down whatever water they found. Riddick smells it first and he says, "No, that's not a good idea." So he throws the water back down. You can see Riddick right here. He's laying right next to that pool of water, and that whole area where that pool of water is, it looks like it's got some sort of geothermal vents or something like that. And the water is no good to drink. So he leaves the water alone. He crawls off to the side. And as you can see, his leg looks like it's snapped. It looks like it's broken. So Riddick sticks his leg between two rocks and he's going to snap his own leg back into place. This is symbolic of those superheroes that emerge after the apocalyptic cycle, where we go from the blue sky where we are now, and this could be some of you, into the red sky, where the conditions in our atmosphere and our world change so drastically that it seems to impart superpowers, and sometimes does, to the survivors, to the leftovers, to those of the Nim or the Nemo, right? Some of those superpowers include things like super fast healing. What is it called? Regeneration, right? The regeneration of our cells. So Riddick exhibits this all throughout every single movie, that he's like double jointed everywhere. He's very flexible, and that he heals extremely fast, which are some things that are imparted to us after the apocalyptic cycle that we're going to go through. Now he looks off into the distance and he hears jackals. These jackals are like otherworldly space dogs, basically, or hellhounds, you could say, right? Hellhounds are a word that I use to affectionately describe a type of Fantazoid creature that resembles a dog, a really big, gigantic dog. And I believe they may actually come from inside of the earth, possibly, but he sees one of these jackals. And it's really interesting because jackals harken back to ancient Egypt. It says, speaking about the underworld and the god that has the jackal head, which is Anubis, it says one of his prominent roles was as a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. he attended the weighing of the scale during the weighing of the heart ceremony, in which it was determined whether a soul would be allowed to enter the realm of the dead or not. So, symbolically, he's trying to enter the realm of the dead, which is located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we've talked about a few times on my channel. We'll probably come back to the Pillars of Hercules just so that people can be on the same page with me as to my theories of where those are. So he jumps down into the water, and he's actually hiding from these jackals because he doesn't want to get torn apart by these dogs when he's all messed up. So he's down underneath the water. The jackals are leering at him from above through the water, but they don't want to touch the water. They're afraid of the water. Now, this also harkens back to the symbolism of these alien creatures being afraid of the water of Earth, and that there's something called holy water, which tends to keep away these demonic creatures, right? I lean towards holy water being more acidic in nature. The pH balances of our waters are likely to change whenever we go through these apocalyptic events, so be careful in the water that you do find. Now, he sees one of these jackals, which sort of comes up to him, and he's being chased by these jackals, and then he goes to this place where he's trying to get through these two pillars. Just like we talked about just a second ago, he's trying to get through the Pillars of Hercules and be given access into the land of the dead, or the necropolis, or the area that goes down into the earth, into the underworld, which is traditionally at the North Pole of our world too. Now, the jackals are following him, and they're trying to hunt him down. The jackals come upon... Riddick is actually hiding up on the cliffs. He's watching the jackals. The jackals come upon this little area of like watery mud, and there's these tentacle, sort of scorpion-tailed things that come up out of the mud, right? These are called mud demons affectionately in the movie. And they look like they have like little pinchers or something like that. And they fight with the jackals. This one actually kills this jackal. You can see it laying down on the ground. And the whole movie is going to be about these creatures, these scorpion-like creatures that we're going to talk about in a bit, these Fantazoids. So now he keeps on going on his trek. He says, that he's having like a legendary bad day, basically. But look at this rock formation. You see how it's sort of juts up out of the ground and then flattens out at the top? They want you to think that this is just completely made up, that this is fictional, that this is just an alien world because nothing on Earth looks like that. But the reality is many things in our world look like this. It's just that they're not in the public eye because they're anomalies, because most of the academic experts of our modern age don't have any type of good explanation for these things other than, well, that's just the way it ended up after millions of years of wind and rain, which I don't subscribe to. We're going to do a special later on, maybe this week, about hoodoos and about these strange rock formations and geologic formations of rocks that shoot up, and they were molded by the plasma that comes down from the sky and flattened out whenever that mud petrified. He says this was shaping up to be one of those legendary bad days. Now check this out too. Do you see how there's these little windows off on the side there? That's because it looks like these alien inhabitants had lived inside of these mountains, just like we have here in our world. After one of our apocalyptic cycles, people carved out houses and homes, not just in the earth, but in those rocks that shot up out of the ground. I believe it's because oftentimes those rocks were hollow, as fulgurites would be, as we talked about when we broke down Beetlejuice, right? If the electromagnetic plasma tentacles that come down from the sky, if they pull mud up from the ground and then they shock it and they electrocute it, it creates fulgurites, which are traditionally hollow and glass on the inside. We have something very similar to that, where we have these rock formations, strange anomalous rock formations that people lived in and carved out and made homes in, just like a Smurf village, right? Here's another example of this alien type of atmosphere right here on our very world, where you can see that prehistoric inhabitants carved out little homes and houses into these rock formations. Well, Riddick was hiding from Fantazoids in the rock formations. Could it be that there were Fantazoids in our world, and therefore people had to find secure places to try to hide from them, and they had to make doors to these places so that those Fantazoids were blocked out and couldn't gain entrance? It's a possibility, right? Now, Riddick's having a flashback, which is going to fill us in on what happened after he became the Lord Marshal. So he's having these flashbacks about being the Lord Marshal, and This is back a little flashback to the last movie where he was the king, he was sitting on the throne, and then they all started demanding that he be their leader and take them to this place called the Threshold. In the necromonger belief system, they believe that there is a place called the Threshold, and beyond that threshold is a land of life and a land of plenty. Basically, it's their promised land, and they want Riddick to take them there. Riddick is having no part of it. He doesn't want to lead anybody or take them to places. He wants the freedom to live life how he chooses. So he's not very comfortable with his new position as king of the necromongers. Pardon me. So he says, I needed a way out. So he's like, I don't like this. I don't enjoy this. He got very caught up in the political system, and it was kind of thrust upon him. He becomes civilized, as you're going to see him say here in a minute. Now, one of the necromonger guys came up to him, and this guy actually wants to be the leader of the necromongers. So he says, how about going to Furia? Why don't we drop you off at Furia, which is Riddick's homeworld, which is rumored to be what part 4 is actually going to be about. Now, he says, what about Furia? And he goes, I know what it's called. He says, yeah, but you just don't know where it is. Furia represents the North Pole. It represents the Garden of Eden. It represents Hyperborea. It represents many of these Garden of the Gods types of places, right? And this is many of us. This is many conversations and research that we've done. The North Pole, the Garden, Paradise. I know what it's called. But he says, you just don't know where it is. That's one of our problems. He says, I need charts. I need maps. That's us. That's us as well. We need charts. We need maps to get to these places. And he says, impossible. He says, I need a direction. That's what we need. The movie is showing us the same truth, that we need to figure out how to get back to the place of emergence. He says, it's been purged from all records, as you well know. Just like it's been purged from all of our records. Where is the North Pole? The North Pole? Where is the place of emergence? Where did we come from, and where are we destined to return to? Some of us, right? He says, Riddick's going home, everyone. So they decide to drop Riddick off on this planet that's supposed to be his home planet, Furia. Turns out it's not. He says, but instead of Furia, we wind up in some place called not Furia. So he's pissed. They dropped him off on some lame whack planet that's not Furia, allegedly. He knows it because he can smell it. He's sniffing it. He's getting a feel for it, right? He's been duped. So they drop him off on this strange alien planet, and you can see him up there on top walking around. And he says, so now we zero the clock. Zeroing the clock is a symbolic description of going through the apocalyptic cycle. Our clocks, our timekeeping starts and stops when we go through these apocalyptic events. When you see the beam of light shoot up, or when you see it retract and disappear, when the world depressurizes, the clock is reset. It hits 0. Hey, thanks, Gen2Gone. Super appreciate you in the chat. Now, Riddick says, I got civilized. I gotta find that animal side again. So that's us. That's our world. We have become civilized. We have lost touch with our earthly nature, with our animal side, right? And we've become so civilized that we cannot any longer survive. We have to depend upon these systems that have been set up for us. So you can see here, Riddick's actually doing some rock climbing. He's trying to get a better perspective. So he raises his perspective by going up higher. Now he has a higher perspective, and now he can see that there is a promised land, or a better place to live in this particular planet where he was dropped off. He says, before long, I realized there was a whole other world over there of water, grass, and life. So he's looking between the two pillars of Hercules, symbolically speaking, and he sees this sort of field, or this valley of plenty, right? And he wants to get over there, but he can't, because there's this scorpion creature, this Fantazoid, there's a whole bunch of them actually between him and this promised land that he wants to get to. This is what it looks like. This thing sort of like sways back and forth like a snake or something, but this is just its tail, and its tail looks like a face. You see that, right? It looks like it. I mean, it's specifically designed to trick people so that they're distracted by the tail, and then the face, the real face of the monster, reaches up from the mud and grabs them and eats them. The tail actually shoots out little like it spritzes out like this sort of spray or something like that, and it makes noise and stuff. But if you didn't know what this creature was, you would think that this was its face. This is important, and we're going to come back to this because we're going to talk about scorpion men and spider people and centaurs and stuff like that, and how people may have actually mistook the tail for the head. Right? Whenever you're dealing with alien creatures. So Riddick jumps down. This thing has venom in it that causes people to pass out, basically. And what he did is he took one of the children, one of the little baby scorpion things, and he allowed it to bite him when he was in a safe place so that he could pass out. And then he starts becoming accustomed to the venom so that he develops a tolerance to it, right? So this is Riddick fighting against the scorpion Fantazoid. Now, there's a little tiny jackal puppy. Right? There's a jackal puppy that's right near one of these scorpion Fantazoid creatures, and Riddick takes off and he sees little jackal puppy and he scoops it up and he's got it in his arms and he's running and he saves this puppy, which is super epic. Like the pictures I took don't really do it a lot of justice, but it's like it's the cutest, most awesome rescue ever. So he becomes friends with his little jackal puppy, right? Which puppies, dogs, bears, all of these things have a similar origin. I believe that the origin of many, maybe all of the animals that we have here on Earth have extraterrestrial origins or interterrestrial origins, and that over time they adapted and they turned into the modern animals that we have today, like dogs that we have befriended or whatever. So he's got this, the dog ends up growing up over a little bit of time and he becomes friends with the puppy. And he takes his jackal dog friend and they go out and they look for signs of life. They're trying to find that little garden area. Now, this is really interesting. Speaking of Anubis, right? It talks about Anubis and it says that the god Anubis was also known as the first of the Westerners. Now, the Western that we have in our world today doesn't exist. All right. Western is just infinitely left, basically, okay? And east is just infinitely right. You know what I mean? Eventually, if you're on a ball and you continue to go west, you're going to end up east. Same thing if you go east, you're going to end up west. And it's all dependent upon your position and to others in the world that you live in, right? But in the old days, that wasn't true. In the old days, west and the westernmost extremity of our world was the North Pole, the place where you can't go any further until you're going into a different realm because you go down inside of the earth. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules. It was the god was also known as the Lord of the Sacred Land, which is paradise. He who is upon his sacred mountain was another name for this god, Anubis. He who sits upon the sacred mountain. The sacred mountain is one of those mountains that the blue beams shoot up out of and fill the world with purity and goodness and oxygen and stuff like that. Now, he finds that there's some kind of a settlement way out there in the land, so he comes over to it. And the dog is getting really concerned. The dog sees something off in the distance, and he's hungry. And so check this out. Riddick takes out an MRE, which I had a lot of these in the military. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good, right? This one says it is, hold on, let me read this one. Let's zoom in and see what kind of MRE this is. Crab enchilada hash. Now, if you've been watching my channel, you know that crabs are bugs, okay? So he's about to eat some mushed up bugs out of this little package, right? So let's see what it looks like. He opens it up, it's like, it's all disgusting. It looks like a squished up bug. So he opens it up, takes a look at it. He's not too happy about it. And he tosses it over to his pup. And he's like, here you go. You eat that. It's all yours. The dog walks over to it and just urinates all over it. He's like, that's nasty. I'm not eating that. And he does it purposefully to show Riddick, like, I don't eat bugs just because I'm a dog. What are you thinking? So he's like, all right. Well, go bring me my reserve then. So instead of eating this MRE of squished up bugs, this dog goes and grabs like this huge Flintstones slab of meat or whatever. And then Riddick looks up at him and he says, where's yours? Which I thought was a funny dad joke of Riddick. And the dog did not like that. The dog was not happy about that. Or the jackal, right? And he's like, that's not funny. Like, you better share that. So he's like, all right, let's eat. So they don't eat bugs. They don't eat squished up bugs. They have a decent meal. And then they see these clouds off in the distance. And the dog or the jackal starts growling at the clouds. He's like, that's danger. That's danger. And so they take a look at it. And he says, just because you've never seen it before doesn't mean it's a bad thing. but the dog knows something. The dog's from this planet, right? So here's the storm. Basically, this is the storm symbolism of the world storm, or the cataclysm that produces a tempest, that creates a storm worldwide because of the huge pressure differential that happens when the world depressurizes, right? So there's going to be a lot of rain. It's going to be a huge electrical rainstorm that introduces otherworldly animals, insects, bugs, creatures, humanoids to our world. And then he takes a look at it with his special X-ray vision or whatever, and he says, it looks like our time is up here. So this is what happens when the storm comes. There's a storm coming. There's a storm on the way. And when that storm arrives, time's up. All right, so he wants to escape. He wants to get out of this world. So he goes to this little building that he found, and he hits like the emergency beacon to let people know that he's there. And he says, like basically there's all these bounty hunters that are looking for him, and they want to come because they want to cash in on Riddick. And it says that it's scanning Riddick, and he's identified as an escaped murderer and a convict, etc. Notice the green lights, right? Every time we see green lights, it's symbolic of the area at the North Pole and the Aurora Borealis. His full name is pictured on here. Do you see that? Richard B. Riddick. So let's break down his name, his full name, Richard B. Riddick. Richard harkens back to the word Rik, which means ruler, right? Or rich. Rich means ruler, which is appropriate because rulers are often rich, right? It also means hard. So Richard means ruler. B is a house, okay? The letter Bet is just a house. So Richard B. Riddick is the red ruler of the house, or the red sky of our house, or our world that we live in today. Now, the second he puts out, hey, thanks for all your support in the chat, everybody. Ken Albert, I see you guys. Check this out. The second he puts out this distress signal, I swear, in the movie, it's like 10 seconds later. There's like mercs dropping in from the sky, and they want to cash in on Riddick. I thought that was kind of funny that they had him arrive so quickly. But they show up immediately. They got all these mercs that are out there looking for Riddick. They set up their equipment. Now check out this equipment that they set up. This thing is this robot. That's just like a pole, basically. And it opens up. It's got these 4 feet. So this thing in and of itself is symbolic of the land at the North Pole, or those 4 lands that are separated by 4 rivers. And you can see it's got this one arm that comes up out of those 4 feet down below. And then the arm reaches down and grabs this bulbous eye. So this arm, or this beam, has this eye at the top of it. This is symbolic of the beam of Mount Meru and the depressurization point, or the hole, the black hole that opens up in our sky. It's even called a cyclops, which is what harkens back to ancient myths that talk about the 3 cyclops that are employed to help out during the Titanomachy, when the Titans were fighting against the gods, right? So there was 3 cyclopses, and then the hecatenares, which we'll talk about here in a bit. So let's check out cyclopses. What does cyclops mean? Cyclops does not mean a giant with 1 eyeball. That's not what it means. That's what it implies, and that's sort of what it means today in the modern age. But back then, that's not what it meant. It meant a circle eye, an eye that is a circle. My eye is not completely circular. If you draw an eye, it's more like almond shaped, right? But the cyclops is the round eye. The round eye, or the hole in the sky itself, the all-seeing eye, the eye of God that opens up in our skies above, right? That is met by that blue pillar. Now we've got some other mercs that drop down in, and they're all trying to cash in on Riddick, trying to catch him. So there's this drama, and the new mercs are like, hey, you better leave us alone. Like, we're catching Riddick, basically. But they're having some trouble. So you'll notice this merc has a little medallion, just like the other ones did. He's basically a space cop, and he represents those space travelers, or sliders as I call them, that go from world to world, jumping into new worlds. And sometimes it seems to me that there's this war in the heavens, that there is the concept of good and evil out there in what I call the fractalverse, where there are certain rules, certain space rules that you're supposed to abide by. If you're going to be a slider and you're going to jump into new worlds, there's things that you're expected to do and things that you're not supposed to do. And these space cops are always seen as following in after these fallen entities that go into these worlds and start changing things around. So this guy, you're gonna hear more about him in just a second, but they ask him for his help because they can't handle Riddick by themselves. So he says, I'll tell you what, you pay my crew, my fuel costs, and the rest is yours. He doesn't want the reward. He doesn't care about money because these people, money is nothing to them, right? These people who rule over each of these worlds that they jump down into, they make money. They're the creators of money. They're the ones that come up with the financial institutions, the banking systems, the currencies, etc. Money is nothing to them except for a means to control the real value, which is life, which is human life. All right, so this guy's like, so you're going to give me the bounty on Riddick? And he says, my name is Johns, by the way. Exactly like in Pitch Black, right? There's a reason for that, which we'll find out in a bit. But this guy's name was Johns. Now, Johns is basically a short form or another way of saying Janus. Janus and Janus is the exact same name. Janus is a god who presided over the beginning and the end of conflict, and hence presided over war and peace. Basically a type of cop, right? All right, so they jump on the mic and he's like, Doll, did you get your sniper rifle and barium rounds? We need to take out this dude. And they all have those badges too. So they say that they need barium rounds. What is that? You can see that there's some sort of a substance in these bullets that's glowing green, right? So that's barium. Now, if you look, they shoot the barium at Riddick's dog and they're able to track it. So this barium is able to make it so that they can track the movement of the person who's shot by it. Now, check this out. This is real. This is why we call this truth in the movies. The movie is showing you something that they could have just made up. They didn't have to have it rooted in realism or in fact or in real life or anything. They could have just made up some stuff. They could have made up a totally different element that doesn't even exist, but they didn't. They chose to go with reality. Barium sulfate is used to help diagnose or find problems in the esophagus, stomach, and bowels. It's a radiographic contrast agent. Contrast agents are used to create a clear picture of the different parts of the human body. It also says contrast agents absorb or alter external electromagnetism or ultrasound, which means if you have this in your body, this particular form of it is not soluble in water, so it doesn't dissolve in water and hurt your body as much as it would if it was just pure barium, basically. But they shoot him. They're able to track him down, right? So they're looking for Riddick, and they go into this huge cave, and they look down into this cave. This symbolically is the Cave of Saviors, which Riddick should be in, appropriately. Also Mount Meru. Inside of this Cave of Saviors, where many types of savior figures have been born in times past, they turn on their weapons, and of course, there is this electric blue light that comes up out of their weapons, right? It's literally electricity that comes up inside of this figurative magical cave, this cave of wonders, cave of treasures, etc. And you'll see that they have this in many of the scenes in Pitch Black as well. As a matter of fact, this whole movie is very similar to Pitch Black, as it should be, because it's repetitive and it's cyclical, right? Same stories over and over and over, just with slight differences in how they play out. So they turn on all of their electric blue lights, and they, like Ghostbusters, just start shooting things that they see moving around in the darkness and stuff. And then they get on the radio, and Johns is on there, and he says, this is Johns, this is Johns. But check this out, off to the side. Did you notice the symbolism here? You see that? That's the Vav. That's that Y symbol. That is basically the blue beam that splits into the top splits into two at the top. It's the split serpent symbolism, the double head of the phoenix or the eagle, etc. It's many different things to many different people, but it's basically the flux capacitor to me. Now he says, maybe you're all scared of the wrong thing, right? Because he comes up on this guy. Riddick throughout all these movies is not a bad guy. Everyone thinks that he is the bad guy because when Riddick appears, bad things happen. Why? Because he represents those people who have transitioned and survived an apocalyptic event, transitioning from the modern world to the new age, right? So they associate the blue beams that shoot up with the end of the world and destruction and stuff. And they have a perception that is opposite of the reality, which is he's not a killer. He's not a bad guy. He never once kills anybody on any of these movies without justification. Basically, he kills bad guys, which makes him a good guy. But everyone in the movie is so terrified of him, just like they're terrified of the apocalypse because it's misunderstood. So this guy is let go by Riddick, and Riddick disappears into the darkness, and he's like, I just saw him. And then he looks up, right? Because he represents the red sky. He says, I just saw him, and then he looks up, and his buddy looks up. They're all looking up as they just saw Riddick, who represents the sky turning red, or the red spectrum color from the Hyperborean electrical arc that it's created. All right, so Riddick is on the prowl, and his dog goes into like this pointy, like, hey, I found something type of a deal, and he's pointing right at that storm. He's like, I know it's coming. Listen, they say this often in the movies. A storm is coming. They're not talking about the storm that's in the movie or anything. Like, so what? Storms come and go all the time, right? That's not that big of a deal. But when they make it a big deal, they're telling you symbolically it is the world storm that is coming, right? I know it's coming. Now, Johns gets on the mic because Riddick stole the dude's walkie-talkie, and Johns can hear him in his little earpiece. And he says, you keep running, Riddick. You keep hiding. Because the end, I will find you. And he's talking all this trash. So Riddick's like, okay, what's up? And he walks right up to him, which I thought was pretty cool. Riddick walks right up to these dudes. For some reason, these dudes just don't shoot him on sight, even though he's worth twice as much dead as he is alive. But it's because Johns needs information from Riddick, and Riddick is smart and intelligent, and he knows this. So when he knows that he's needed by people, he knows he's not going to die. He's not going to get killed by those people until they get what they need. So he says, I want to know what happened there 10 years ago. And he goes, the father of Johns, the first Johns, who died because that first Johns wanted to sacrifice children to the Fantazoids as a form of expiation, right? If you remember the movie The Mist, he wanted to sacrifice those people to the Fantazoids so that he could live. So Riddick had a big fat problem with that and killed that dude. He says, it's the end that you want to think about now, right? Not the past, the future. The end that is coming. It's soon on the way. It's right around the corner. And just to make a point of it, he says, you see that? And then they show you the storm, the tempest, the world storm. And he says, it's the end you want to think about. And they show you in the next scene, the same scene, a storm. Think about the end. And there's this electrical storm on the way, right? The storm of the world. He says, and then look how close this is. I didn't even zoom in on this. This is Hollywood saying, this is important. And they put it way up close for you to see. That's your clock. This right here, which is the world storm or the world tempest, is our clock. It's what they were all based off of. It's when they all started and began, right? That's your clock. That's how they mark time. Because time becomes all messed up. The seasons become messed up. Our time right now is speeding up, and it's getting faster and faster and faster as the sun picks up on its cycle around the earth. All right, so he walks off into the distance, into the storm area, or towards the storm, I should say. They kill his dog as he's walking away, or his jackal, and he's pissed. So he ends up getting into a fight, which he loses, and he gets captured. And this is Riddick doing his sort of Atlas type of a pose where he holds his arms up into the sky. Like all three movies have this. And that's what the blue beam does. It shoots up and it branches out at the top and it moves around and it dances around. Like we've talked about quite a few different times. It's known as the Squatterman symbol. This is the Irminsul of the Saxon world tree symbolism. This is the bow. This is like the bow of Orion and Shiva and so many other things too. I actually put an example of these different symbolic elements in the community section on my channel. All right, so Johns gets pissed off because Riddick basically killed his son and he's not answering John's questions, so he punches him and starts beating him up. And then his buddy, who Riddick let go earlier in the movie, says, hey, are we beating men in chains now? You know what I mean? So Riddick got into this guy's head. This guy right here, who's supposed to be after him and supposed to be a bad guy, easily got into his head by an act of kindness. He let him live. He showed him, I'm not a killer. I'm not here. I could just kill you, but I'm not going to, right? So now this guy is starting to have a problem because they're beating Riddick up, when normally he probably wouldn't have cared, right? And then this other guy says, he's talking to Riddick and he says, I know what's coming. called to find you, the serpents. So there are serpents on their way to find Riddick, right? Which is symbolically the plasma serpents that snake down from the sky or from the hole in the sky that gives you the illusion of Medusa and her snakes coming off of her head and stuff, petrifying objects and people as they do. Now, when the rain comes, it creates all this mud. All of this mud where these demons are dormant in the dirt. When the dirt turns into mud, all of these Fantazoid creatures come up out of the mud, and basically they're these scorpion-looking beings that I showed you earlier. And he says, it ain't me that you got to worry about, right? And that's true. It's not the apocalypse that we need to worry about. It's not the sky turning red or the blue beams shooting out or the changes that happen in the world. It is the creatures that come into this world, and some of them are predatory. Not all of them, but there's enough that are predatory that in times past, we actually hid from them initially, as we showed you, right? All of the rock structures that people dug into to try to hide, people living in cliffs and stuff, hiding from Fantazoids. But there came a time when people were able to venture out, and there was the Fantazoids started to hide and relocate and stuff, and then humans learned their weaknesses, and they developed hunting parties to go out and kill specialized classes of killers to hunt and to fight otherworldly creatures, monsters that I call Fantazoids, right? And they hunted them to extinction, and they were paid handsomely, just like these bounty hunters. These mercs are paid to go out and find Riddick. So they go out in the rain. The rain also comes, and it symbolizes the deluge. This is a red planet. This is a desert planet. If you have a red sky or a red spectrum sky, and you have those blue beams that are shooting up, and you have a desert world, after that apocalyptic cycle, the rain will come. The rain will drop down from the sky because all of those blue beams shoot up ionized oxygen, and it stays in the upper atmosphere. When the red sky people go through their apocalypse and the sky opens up, ionized hydrogen comes down, smashes into all of that buildup of ionized oxygen, and it creates an ocean of water, which falls down and gives us the deluge. Now, we're going to take a little side trip, and we're going to talk about these particular classes of Fantazoids, these particular types, right? Now, please keep in mind these are cartoonifications, all right? These are types, symbols, drawings, cartoon versions of a reality that once was common knowledge and once was feared from by the inhabitants of the world across the world. So take a look at them. They don't have eyeballs. That's one thing that we've pointed out. Time and time again when it comes to these otherworldly creatures, especially those that drop down from the sky, they typically are portrayed as not having eyes or tiny eyes that they can't really see out of. And so they have increased other senses like hearing and stuff, right? Now check this out. You'll see they have scorpion tails and stuff. Let's read a verse from Revelation in the Bible, chapter 9. And it talks about, in the last movie, we talked about the locusts, the plague of locusts that come up from the bottomless pit. Very similar. Immediately after that, there is this part that talks about these horses and riders that come up, and it says, for the power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails. So these horses had these tails that were able to hurt people, and they had mouths that were able to hurt people as well. Indeed, their tails were like snakes, having heads with which to inflict harm. Exactly like I showed you earlier when we were taking a look at these creatures where they had these tails up here that have faces on them, and they look like they're actual faces. You know what I mean? So they were mistook as being the face of the creature, when in reality, the face of the creature is down here on its torso, right? Now, that reminds me of fabled and legendary creatures, for example, the manticore. The manticore, affectionately the tiger human or the tiger man. This is just an artist rendition of it, right? I like this particular rendition just because it put on these sort of insectoid kind of crab arms. It's got this scorpion tail. They have horns oftentimes, right? Oftentimes these creatures have horns, many different horns. Here's another rendition of the manticore. As you can see, it's got this sort of spiky tail. Now the legends indicate from ancient bestiaries that were kept as official record by churches worldwide so that they could document these strange monsters, right? The official record says that the manticore had a tail that had these barbs on it that it could fling at people, and it could basically shoot a dart from its tail and hit the person and take it down, right? Here's another image of the manticore. This one you'll see is like a part tiger, part human face, and then they've got that same scorpion tail. Now, when regarding these otherworldly creatures, I find that it's best to use comparative mythology to see what all of the similarities are when we look at these types of images. Check out this manticore. Obviously, it's gigantic and it's eating a human being, right? But it's not fully a lion with just a scorpion tail. Take a look at the feet. Horse feet, hooves. This becomes really interesting because these animals are not just subject to one particular vision that people draw down and they write down, right? So check this one out. Here's another version of the manticore from an ancient bestiary. Look at these trees. Doesn't that look like giant asparagus? That looks like it's another world, and yet that's Earth. This was drawn during a time when the Earth was different. Look at the background. Doesn't that look exactly like the planet that Riddick is currently on? The same exact color scheme, right? Take a look at these creatures. These are all supposed to be versions of the manticore. This one right here, actually, they gave it horns, as they should, on top, and it's got hooves as well as the spiky tail with the barbs or whatever. But I also want to point something else out. Keep in mind the posture of these animals. Do you notice how it has the head like almost facing upwards instead of being on the front of the animal like a lion or a dog would be? The head comes upwards and it's reversed. It's always pointing, or it's not always, but sometimes it's pointing in the opposite direction. The hooves are interesting. I'm going to come back to the hooves. Here's another example of a manticore eating a human, and its head is reversed and it's facing its butt for some reason. Imagine that the head is not a head, but it's a tail that looks like a head, which is why it's facing the other way, because that's the way it's actually going. You know what I mean? All right, so here's another rendition of it where its head is facing all like it's ridiculously like pulling back to look backwards, right, at its butt or whatever. Here's another version of a manticore with like a mohawk or something where its head is pulled way back towards its butt. I put forth the theory that that's not its head, that is something that resembles a head, right? Here's another version of the manticore. This one looks more lionish, but it still has that same sort of pincher scorpion tail, right? Just like we see on these mud demons in the movies. Here is an ancient rendition from the ancient Middle Eastern areas of a scorpion man. The scorpion men were discussed throughout ancient writings as being actual physical entities that live inside of the earth, and they guard the entrance to the underworld. In this one, you can see the scorpion man has 2 legs. Here's a better version of it, sort of a drawing of it. You can see it's got the scorpion tail as well. Here's another example. Sometimes they're depicted as full-bodied scorpions with all the different legs and stuff, and then they have this sort of torso that resembles a person with a lot of facial hair or long flowing hair or whatnot, and then they give the scorpion men these bows. Why? Because the manticore shoots arrows. That's what it does, right? Here's another version of the same type of creature, this sort of scorpion man, and you can see it's got like this sort of snake tail coming off the back, but these ones only have 2 legs. I found that to be really interesting because these ones in the movie also only have 2 legs. Interesting, right? Sometimes they're drawn with 4 as well, as you can see here. Sometimes they're given wings. Also harkens to the movie, gives a sort of nod to the movie The Scorpion King, where the Scorpion King is a Fantazoid. He's not a human or anything, symbolically speaking, right? This is another worldly creature. It's from another place, right? And it has parts that we associate with human looking, right? It says here that these scorpion men were featured in several Akkadian language myths, including the Enuma Elish and the Babylonian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh wanted to go find eternal life, so he needed to get to the Garden of Eden. He needed to go down into the earth where he could live much longer, right? Before he gets there, the entrance is being guarded. The entrance to the underworld is guarded by these scorpion men. So he has to actually pass this test, proving that he's like part god in order to enter. Here is an Egyptian version of the exact same creature. Check this out. You can see that it's got a scorpion tail right there, but it's horse. It's part horse down here, right? It's actually got like the lion face that's facing backwards the other direction, right? And it's got this sort of bow and arrow deal, and it actually has a wing as well, just like it was insectoid with wings, right? Which reminded me of this Black Mirror episode. Was this? It was either, no, this was Love, Death, and Robots. So this was called Beyond the Aquila Rift, in an episode of Love, Death, and Robots, which shows you an example, a really stellar, creepy, good example of the exact type of Fantazoid creatures that we're talking about when referencing these multi-legged Fantazoids that come down from the sky and drop down, right? Check it out. It's got many different legs. It resembles a human, like this top part right here. Actually, when it's back in this cave, like at first, the protagonist in the movie, they think it's a human, right? Because it kind of has like a face and like a chest and some legs. But when it comes out, he sees it's not human at all. And then there's this huge pincher. See that pincher on the top in the very back? This is an excellent representation of a type of otherworldly Fantazoid. See that white, creamy, reflective, shiny kind of a white color that they have? Here's another version of it. As you can see, it sort of resembles like a woman's face right there in the middle, many different legs, and then this sort of pincher type of a tail, right? Facing its front, curved forward, facing its front, right? Now, here's the ones from the movie. I just did a side-by-side of these in like this Photoshop type of a thing that I have, where you can see these are the ones in the movie, and these are the ancient depictions. In real life, in the real world, right? Truth in movies. All right, so what this also reminded me of is ancient depictions of various gods. This one right here is Hecate, which is really interesting, and we're going to talk about why. So Hecate is represented by, it looks like these two wolves on either side, but if you look at Hecate, she is one being that looks like it's sort of Siamese and split into all these different versions. Here's a much better statue version of it, a depiction of Hecate. Now you can see that she's got all these different arms and stuff, multiple legs coming out of her because she's connected one torso, 3 heads, 3 arms, 3 legs. Was it a human? This god that came down from the heavens, or was it a Fantazoid? Hecate, a Greek goddess associated especially with the underworld, night and witchcraft. Now, Hecate is one of the roots of the Hecatoneres. The Hecatoneres, or the Hecatonchieres, in Greek mythology is one of those creatures, those giants that were summoned to help out during the Titanomachy, or the war between the gods and the Titans, right? The Titans were winning, and so the gods called upon the help of the 3 Cyclopses, which is the 3 beams of Mount Meru, and then the anode and cathode beams and mountains on either side, which shoot straight up, and they branch out at the top, creating like this sort of cyclopean look with a stick and then the ball at the top of it, right? So check this out. Hecate, basically, Hecaton, or of Hecate, Hieres. Let's check this out. These creatures were called the 100-handed ones, right? So there were these huge, gigantic, titanic, massive, monstrous creatures in form. Maybe not in physical actuality, but in form, that's what they resembled. That's how people described them, as these huge human-like creatures, but they had all of these hands that were all over the place. Specifically, it was actually arms, but then over time it became hands, right? Now imagine the hand shape. Keep that in mind, okay? The Hecate, or the Hecate-on, means of Hecate, or the underworld. Hieres, which means hands. If you look up that word right there, hands, so Hecate, Hieres, which is also 100, right? Hand, 100-handed. So the hand shape. Now, hiere, we're going to break this down, and it's going to make a lot of sense here in just a minute. So we're talking about the Hecatoneres, which is the 100-handed titans that were employed to help to turn the tides of the Titanomachy, right? If we go back to this word hieres, Heka is related to Hecate. Hecaton means 100, but hieres is related to hieron. Hieron. It just has a different suffix. That's all, right? Now, hieron is related to the word hand. Can you see how ancient people who were unfamiliar with these strange Fantazoid creatures could look at them having a torso that stopped at the top, and then they had all of these different feet or arms or hands or whatever at the bottom, and this is what they called them, or this is what they were referenced as. Also, it could be where they were from. They were from the Hecateneres, or they were from the place that has hundreds of arms coming up off of it, which is plasma, basically, right? But they were also the hand creatures. Some of these creatures were shaped like giant hands walking around the earth, like a bug, basically, like gigantic bugs. The Thing is one of them from the Addams family, right? These are things. These are creatures that we don't know what name to give them because they look like all kinds of different creatures that are mixed into one. There's different forms of them. This is from the actual movie The Thing, where this is a type of this creature that is depicted that we're talking about, right? Going back to this girl, she's another type. You can see she looks just like a hand, right? That's like walking around. So I believe that this is the origin for horses and where horses come from, and horse type monsters, centaurs, etc., right? Do we talk about that? I think we do talk about that. So check this out. Chiron, or Chiron, or however you would like to pronounce it, he was basically seen as the wisest of all of these creatures, right? He was allegedly part human and part horse, being a centaur. And he was also a doctor, which means he was the centaur for disease control. Okay. I really wanted to get that joke in there. All right, let's move forward. All right, so what else we got? All right, so Riddick. Riddick is messed up and he needs to heal himself. He totally got nailed in the chest. He's got this huge hole, this gaping hole in his chest. He's got some sort of a nail, or I don't know, a claw or something that was stuck into his chest, and he sees these little glowing balls of light. So he walks up this mountain, this total Dr. Seuss nightmare mountain where the Grinch probably lives at the top. He's way down here. You see him? Now let's zoom in on this real quick. I want to show you. In the storm, going up the mountain, trying to find these glowing balls. These are the pearls of life. These are the pearls of wisdom. These are the pearls, or the balls of energy, that come up off of Mount Meru, that rain down into that island cup, or that valley that's at the middle of the world. These are the pearls we talked about these pearls when we broke down Slumberland. Remember that? And they were looking for these magical light up pearl type of objects that grant you wishes and stuff like that, right? So he goes to find one of these pearl things, picks it up, and then he takes out that thing that was stuck in his chest, and he puts this pearl thing right where his right where his chest is or whatever, and it heals him. Now in the movie, they're trying to say that it's burning hot, so it just sealed up the wound or whatever, which also works. But symbolically, he is taking mana and he's putting it to his body in an area where is the holy grail, or the crater of our world, right? And this stuff has the ability to speed up the process of regeneration for your cells. So he puts it on himself and he becomes healed, right? All right, so he gets into a fight with a Fantazoid. He's yelling and stuff, and Johns has a change of heart, okay? He doesn't follow suit like his son did. His son wanted to basically just kill Riddick. He was in it for himself, but this John shows some character. And he says, extraction in 30 seconds or less. Let's go, let's go. And the other team, now this woman here, Riddick was kind to. He also could have killed her earlier in the movie, but he didn't. And that ends up changing her perception of him. So she actually comes down, helps Riddick out. They go back up into their spaceships, and Riddick's going to take off to some other place. And he says, where are you going now, Riddick? And he says, sooner or later, we all have to head home, which leads us into Riddick Part 4. Furia. I don't know what it's going to be called, but that is the rumor that Riddick's going to go home now, and we should see a Riddick Part 4 where he returns to paradise, or he returns to his home that was abandoned so long ago. And that's our movie. That's our movie, Riddick, from 2003, the third movie in the trilogy. Leave me a comment if you enjoyed this presentation. I really enjoyed the part about the Fantazoids. I'm probably going to go back and rewatch this presentation immediately because I got a lot of good stuff myself while doing this research. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
Come